welcome back guys. In this video we're going to do something a little bit different and we're going to add some features into these monitor enclosures in particular to help with a little bit of animal enrichment. So that is right, we're going to do a few little tweaks to these enclosures just to start putting a little bit more enrichment inside of them for these little goannas to actually appreciate, and it's going to be super simple. Now, if you guys have been to a zoo before that's got koalas, you'll probably know the exact route that I'm actually going to go down. So basically what I'm going to do is create some little PVC brow holders that'll go onto the back of these little uprights. I'll just be able to tack them in with a screw, and what we're going to do is we're going to essentially be able to put gum branches and other sorts of materials and things in there to add a little bit of greenery, because as you can see from the images that I've actually got inside of all these enclosures, there's plenty of bush in their environments. Now, I don't think I'm necessarily going to be able to grow gum trees inside of these enclosures. Maybe that's something that I'll look down the line at. I'm not 100% on that, but the idea of doing something that's a little bit simple for me, but we'll be able to change it up for the goannas, is just by adding in some browse into these enclosures for a little bit of animal enrichment. It'll also provide a little bit of shade to these animals as well, with some of the leaf cover and things coming into the enclosures. It's going to be a very simple process. I am going to try to make it look somewhat neat. I don't want to see these little brow holders. That's the thing that I hate at a lot of zoos, when you see a white PVC pipe sticking in a gum tree looking like it's, part of the fixture or thereabouts. But what I'm going to do is essentially make up these little PVC pipes, a narrow version. I'm going to paint them with some acrylic paints, and we're going to put them in these enclosures, and then hopefully the animals will actually get something out of having these extra brows in their enclosures. So guys, there's really not much that I'm going to have to use for this. It's a very cheap project to be able to do and be able to add these things into your enclosure. Basically, you're going to need some form of PVC pipe, so you can choose one to however thick that you want it. I believe this is 20 or 25 mil, thereabouts. You're going to need some end caps, so they go onto the end of your little pipe sections. Those are really important. I'm actually going to glue my end caps on, so that's entirely up to you whether you're actually going to do that. I do hope to put a little bit of water in there to hopefully lengthen the amount of time that the brows are alive for. It is a bit of an experiment, so I'm having a bit of a red hot crack at it. I don't 100% know how this is all going to go, of course. Something else you're going to need is a drill of some variety with a drill bit. I'm just using a step bit on an impact driver today, and I've also got a Phillips head bit. I'm going to use some little button screws to actually screw the pipes into place. To cut the pipes, I'm going to use a hacksaw, because that's what I've got on hand. We're also going to use some sandpaper, because I'm actually going to rough up the pipe before I actually do much to it. And the reason for that is so that the acrylic paint actually adheres better to the pipe. And speaking of acrylic paint, I've got a big ugly looking box of all sorts of coloured acrylic paints. So basically, my plan is to get stuck in, sand this up, cut it into some sections, and I'm gonna hope to make at least 6, maybe 8 pieces out of this pipe. They don't have to be super long. I'm only planning to make them maybe a little bit over 100 mil long, so nothing too crazy. So what I'm going to do is get stuck in. I'm going to actually sand the whole pipe first, just before I do anything crazy to it, because if I've got little sections of pipe, that is a little bit painful to sand versus, one big length. So I'm going to get stuck in and do that, and then we'll get chopping and drilling and hop straight to it. Okay, so I just spent about a minute sanding that pipe. It doesn't have to be anything too crazy, but it's just to take the kind of gloss edge off the top of it, and then that way it's kind of a bit rougher, so the glue will actually bond better, and so will the paint. Really not that fancy, but it's just those little things that will hopefully make the details actually count. Now, I'm going to cut it, but what I'd like to suggest is I'm going to cut it on 45-degree angles. And the reason for that is essentially if there's a 45-degree angle on there, I'll be able to just tack a little screw in super easy without having to like pass through the tube as such. So that's my reasoning. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. I'm sure you can get away without doing it, and you could actually just drill a bigger hole using a step drill or something like that through the other side, so you can actually pass a Phillips head or something through there. But I can't be bothered with that. And for the sake of cutting on a funny angle, I'm just going to do that. So yeah, I'm going to chop this up and then we're going to start gluing it. Okay, so I've chopped them all up now. You can see that they've got that kind of little 45-degree angle on them. So I'm just going to drill a bunch of holes through these edges now, so then I can tack these against the trees, on the back of the trees too, so you don't see these things. Hopefully that's the plan. And yeah, it looks like I got 8 of them, so that means I'm going to have 2 little brow holders in each one of these bigger monitor enclosures. Something that I'll definitely probably implement in quite a few enclosures here, and yeah, let's check it out. I'm going to start drilling these, start gluing them, and start painting them. So these little tubes have dried up pretty good now. They're still going to take a little bit to cure, but they're dry enough that I can actually paint the outside of the tube without worrying too much. And then we're going to give them at least a night or so just to kind of like air off and let the acrylic paints all dry. Now I was actually painting something yesterday where I've kind of already got a bit of a mix of this kind of reddish, I don't know what you want to call it, kind of reddish pinkish sort of colour here. And this is kind of similar to what it looks like in one of the branches inside the Kimberley rock monitor enclosure. So I'm just going to paint this, and I'm dabbing it because I want texture in it. I don't want it to look all nice and smooth or anything like that. Plus it means like chances are I'm going to do a couple of different coats and stuff over the top of this. That means they're just going to bond even better again. I haven't really thought it through as to how I'm going to dry these, just because I don't know where I'm going to put them down. I probably should have built like some sort of little rack where I actually could have hung them all from. What am I going to do? I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put them down on the back edge of where they're going to actually be as best as I can, because that's probably going to be the edge that's not going to be seen, so to speak. So maybe I'll give that a crack. Ideally, yeah, don't do what I do. Hang them up using some wire coat hangers or something like that. I actually don't think I've got anything on hand. I think I'm going to do a couple of different kind of coats and things over these as well, just to kind of make them blend a little bit more seamlessly. So I'm going to do 2 in these colours. Then we're going to mix up some greys and some yellows and things for the Gillens ones. But I'm just going to keep cracking on. We'll have a quick look after they've done the first coat. So here you can see we've got the little tubes all fixed up. You can see that there's a little bit of paper on those, so if you are going to do this, don't do what I do and maybe use some sort of hanger or something like that to hang these as a little hole. But once it's against a branch, you're not going to notice it. And the whole idea is I'm going to be putting these in areas where hopefully you don't notice them anyway, but the whole reason for painting them was just so that they blended a little bit further in case you kind of look around the enclosure a little bit. I don't want to see these ugly looking things sticking out there. But as you can see, got a few different shades. Most of them are grey because of the dead wood and things in the Gillens enclosures. These ones have a couple bits of yellow on them for some of the more yellow branches. And these, well, they're a little bit more red to blend in with like the Kimberley rock monitor background and all that. So what I'm going to do is I'm essentially going to get some little button screws that I got out and hopefully just hand screw these into the timber. I don't think I'm going to need any more than that, but I'm going to screw these all in, and I've actually already collected some browse, so hopefully I can deck all these enclosures out. Sweet. So I've put all of these in. There's 2 per enclosure in this monitor corner, and you really can't see them. So there's one behind that log there. You can't see that. It's pretty much as you're walking around, which is awesome. And there is one behind the log there. You can just make it out, but it's really hard unless you're actually looking for it. You can't really make it out. So that's the most important thing for me, is making sure that it's still aesthetically pleasing. Here's the Kimberley rock monitor. You can't see anything going up there. The only way you can see it is if you come right on this angle, and you can see a little bit there, but it blends pretty good for now. You know, it might be something that I tweak down the line, but for now, not half bad. So that you can kind of just see the base of one behind there in the Tristis. And then, I mean, looking at it, yeah, you can just see that pipe there. And that's behind this sort of upright bit here. It's quite difficult to see. It's not something that's going to catch your eye if you're just looking at the tanks, unless you were having it pointed out. Now, probably the most obvious 2 are these 2. But again, you have to be right down in this corner to be able to see it. So it's not something that's going to be like blatantly obvious, and the other one's there. So all in all, considering the amount that I've got to work with, it's not bad. It's not horrible. As I said, it could be something that's, you know, could be perfected with time. But for the time being, I'm pretty happy. So no complaints from me. Now, let's go grab some browse. I've got some out in the yard that I've recently collected. And we'll chop them down to size and we'll put them in these enclosures. And yeah, hopefully these monitors will enjoy a little bit of greenery temporarily. I think once I get the browse in place, then I'll probably just put a bit of water into those tubes just to see if I can keep them a little bit greener for a little bit longer. And yeah, we'll introduce some new smells and some new foraging opportunities for these little tiny goannas. Jeez, you Gil and I better be happy. I've got half a bloody gum tree here. So yes, I've collected some gum leaves and some other native branches for foraging. And basically my plan is with these is to stick these into those little holders, create some new smells for these little Gillini and the Tristis and the Kimberley rock monitor. And when these become dead leaves and all sorts, they'll become leaf litter. Worst case, I can even just give the branches to my hopping mice for something to chew on as a bit of a natural foraging material for them. And you know what, like something that I've actually started up, and I will mention now, so I've started up my own native garden as well to hopefully not even have to do this in the future. I'll be able to hopefully have my own plants here that I'll be able to keep an eye on and be able to harvest off. So without any further ado, I'm going to cut these to size, get them into place, fill these little tube things with water, and then we're going to have a bit of a geese and check them out. What a difference that makes. Now, of course, it's going to be a bit of experimenting. I'm not sure how long these branches are actually going to last in their greener form. Of course, they're not going to last forever, but as far as these enclosures go, it's going to be a lot different for me to be planting enclosures in here. And some of these animals don't need that really, really high humidity. You know, a lot of these animals come from very dry environments. So this is a way to keep minimal humidity in these enclosures, just being that little bit of water in those tubes. but allowing the animals to still have that kind of natural plant to be able to forage in and be able to kind of peruse. And, replacing this means they'll be replacing smells and all sorts, so it'll be encouraging the animals to actually think a little bit better as well. One of my favourite things to do, a little bit of a selfish thing, is to actually turn all the other lights off in this room and really make these enclosures shine. It's about as best as you're going to see them is when nothing but the lights in these enclosures are on. No other reflections or anything like that are getting in the way. Man, they look next level. I'm loving this stuff, hey? Absolutely loving it. But yeah, I mean, it'll be cool to see these guys if they end up coming out. It's a little bit late now, but tomorrow morning I might be able to catch them actually out and basking and things, and hopefully I'll get some footage of these guys sniffing around in these branches. But being the middle of winter, that's also a little bit hard to kind of get that sort of interaction with these animals, as most of them are down for the countdown for sleep, but that's okay. Even if they don't come out, at least they've got the opportunity to have a little forage around. It's really hard to be able to actually see these little pipes too, unless you go looking around in the back of the enclosures. Like, we're right behind this log now, and those little pipes are filled up with water too, so hopefully that'll last a few days at least, and try to keep these branches a little bit more supple, a little bit more green. But how good do they look blending in like that? Absolutely awesome. Of course, any of these little branches that are up near the heat, they're probably going to wilt away pretty quickly. I could probably just try to, let's see if we can prop you a little bit different. Goannas might have something else to say about that, but I'll keep that away from the heat a little bit and see if that makes them last a little bit longer too. Man, this looks awesome. And something else that it's going to add to these enclosures is actually spots of shade, which is really important, because you've got to think, these animals are going to use dappled light in the wild as well as, obviously bright light. So not only with the light cycles coming through, like I've got all the lights on now, including the UV, but these will kind of chop and change throughout the day, which will provide different levels of shade to different parts of the enclosure. So this is something else that's actually added into, apart from just enrichment. Again, because of the time of year, these guys have been super quiet, so it's been hard to actually get much footage of these guys being out much at all. I have actually managed to get a little bit of footage of a couple of Gillini cruising around in this enclosure in particular, using the Grid Connect camera that I've got set up in the room. And you can see that he's sniffing around some of the leaves and stuff down the bottom there, but he really is just focusing on his environment. I'm sure in due course though, these guys will be really wanting to get into these leaves and checking it out. I think it's one of those things that I'm just going to replace on a somewhat regular basis. And as I said, all the dry leaf litter can hit the deck and just become part of the fixture in there anyway. Nothing will go to waste. All these branches that will be left behind, I'll just give to the mice as a bit of a chewing opportunity. But yeah, it's awesome seeing these guys use their environment, just like this little one that's out basking now in that little Y. And it comes through pretty good. I have found that the leaves tend to last about, give or take, about a week before they start really drying out. But how good do these enclosures look with these little guys hanging out with them? I was lucky enough to see these guys out during the middle of the day when I was home off work for one of my days off, but I don't catch much of them anymore during the morning when they start to warm up, because everything starts to warm up a bit later in the day. I absolutely love watching these guys interact with their environment though. Even simple things just like these guys climbing into their little hollow logs. It's awesome having them hump too. Absolutely love it. This little particular one was pretty hungry this day, so I managed to get a whole bunch of footage of him actually eating a few wood roaches, which is awesome to see. I love how these little guys just use their mouths and swallow these little wood roaches down whole, sometimes using their logs in their environment or their branches to be able to smash the wood roaches against. That's all interesting stuff to me. I absolutely love these little Gillini, and they can take down some pretty big prey. I think my favourite thing about small goannas is the fact that they still act like big goannas, just in tiny little bodies. And you can see that here by this particular goanna just smashing his prey against this log, just trying to break it up a little bit or kill it, or kind of just maim it so he can get it down a little bit easier. He might be using it to rotate it around too, so he can get into his mouth a lot easier. Look at that. smashes it down. It's like they're smart enough to kind of use the logs and things like a little tool. So it's been about a week now, and we've got a whole bunch of dead leaves in these enclosures from where these leaves have started to crisp up and dry up, which is to be expected, of course. But the animals have been using them. I've unfortunately missed pretty much all opportunities to be able to film them using them, but they have been getting around in amongst them, in particular the gillons and the tristis. I haven't actually seen too much of the Kimberley rock monitor this week, but as I said, things are cooling down a fair bit here. It is supposed to reach a bottom of about 2 degrees tonight, so things are pretty well hunkered down. You know, this room does get cool. It doesn't get that cool, of course, but it does get quite cool. So anyway, I decided I'd freshen things up. Got a bunch of new cuttings today while my wife and I went for a bit of a drive just to check out the land, so to speak. So I thought, you know what, I'll freshen some new leaves in here and continue the cycle, continue some more smells, some more enrichment for these animals, and yeah, you know, overall just give them something else to fondle around in. And all these leaves, these are all going to turn into leaf litter for these enclosures. As you can see, some of them are already starting to fall down to the bottom, and that's all good. That's just going to go into leaf litter for these enclosures, and I can always scatter it around other enclosures as well to enrich those guys. So anyway, I'm going to chuck some more leaves in here and yeah, continue the cycle. Well, there you have it, guys. Just another way to provide a little bit of enrichment for your animals, and it's super simple, super cheap, doesn't cost much at all. I think all in all I probably spent, I'm going to hazard a guess and say 10-15 bucks on some PVC, and I had screws lying around. Acrylic paints, well, most of us that are into this DIY stuff, you've got acrylic paints hanging around and they don't have to be too flash. So what do you reckon? Drop a comment of what you think down below. Give me some tips if you think of some other ways that I could maybe improve this as well. I'm always trying to learn more and see if I can develop my skills as a reptile keeper even further. But yeah, guys, thanks for joining me on this video. Make sure to drop it a like, share it around if you want to, and don't forget to check me out on Patreon and Teespring as well if you want some extra content and also some merchandise. Alrighty guys, until next time, I'll catch you on the next one. Take it easy.